The war was finally over. For 5 long years, the galaxy had burned under the shadow of the Zarn Dominion, a ruthless empire that crushed planets and enslaved entire species with cold efficiency. Their ships were faster, their weapons stronger, their soldiers relentless. Many believed no one could stop them, but humanity had stood its ground, fighting back with determination, clever strategy, and fierce unity. Captain Darius Cole, one of Earth's most decorated soldiers, had led the final assault on Zarn, primed the heart of the Dominion. He had fought through fire, metal, and death to plant the Coalition's flag on the burning ruins of the Zarn Emperor's throne. Now, in a grand ceremony aboard the Coalition's command ship, the victors gathered to celebrate. Music played, flags waved, representatives of dozens of species clapped and cheered. The council had gathered to reward those who had risked everything. And Darius, the man who had become a legend, was called forward. He stood tall, broad-shouldered, his armor still scarred from battle, eyes calm and sharp. Captain Cole, the Coalition's High Chancellor, said, "In gratitude for your service and bravery, we offer you a reward, anything within reason. A ship, a title, land on any free world, even command of a fleet." The room quieted. Eyes turned to Darius. Most expected him to ask for a battleship or a planet of his own. But Darius looked past the crowd, his gaze locking on a small figure standing behind a line of guards. She was barely taller than a child, with delicate, lavender skin, glowing silver eyes, and thin limbs that looked as if they might snap in a strong wind. She wore a simple robe and held her hands tightly in front of her, trembling slightly as the lights and noise surrounded her. She was Princess Elia of Erisari, once a prisoner in the Zarn Emperor's personal collection, known as the Frail Flower of the Stars. She had been taken as a trophy when the Erisari homeworld fell. Darius had seen her once during the final assault, locked behind a golden cage, silent, still, eyes filled with quiet sorrow. He had not forgotten. "I want her," Darius said clearly. The room fell silent. No one understood. A council member blinked. "You mean the Erisari girl, Princess Ilia?" "Yes," Darius said. "As my reward, I want her under my care, safe, free." Confusion spread. Whispers filled the air. Some thought he was joking. Others looked at Ilia and saw nothing worth asking for. She was weak, silent, and visibly afraid. Even among her own people, she was not considered important. Her health was poor, her voice rarely heard, and she had done nothing publicly heroic. A general frowned. "Captain, why her?" Darius looked straight at him, his voice calm but firm. "Because she's not weak, not where it counts." The words hung in the air, strange and unexplained. Even Ilia seemed shocked, her wide eyes staring at Darius like she couldn't believe what he had just said. But the council, bound by honor and the laws of reward, agreed. Ilia was no longer a prisoner. She would leave with Darius. That night, as the celebration continued and the music played louder, Darius walked quietly through the docking bay of his ship, the Resolute. Behind him, Ilia followed in silence, her small feet barely making a sound on the metal floor. She looked around nervously, her hands trembling, still dressed in the soft robe the Zarn had forced her to wear. Darius turned and looked at her, his voice gentler now. "You don't have to be afraid. No one here will hurt you." She said nothing, only looked away. He led her to a private cabin, quiet, clean, with soft lights and a large window that looked out into the stars. "This is your room now. You can stay as long as you like. You're free." Still, no answer. She sat on the edge of the bed, eyes down. Darius left without another word. He didn't force anything. The next few days passed slowly. Ilia remained quiet. She didn't eat with the crew. She spoke to no one. The crew whispered about her, some were curious. Others were confused. Why would he ask for her? The medic said to another officer. She looks like she could break in the wind. But Darius said nothing. He kept his focus on his mission, bringing war survivors home, helping rebuild fallen worlds. Every now and then, he would pass her door and pause, just for a moment, wondering if she was okay. One night, as the stars drifted slowly past the window, Ilya finally spoke. Darius had just brought a tray of food to her cabin. He didn't expect her to eat, but he always brought it anyway. As he turned to leave, a small voice, barely above a whisper, stopped him. Why, me? He turned slowly, surprised. Ilya was sitting upright, her large silver eyes watching him with a mix of fear and confusion. Why did you choose me? She asked again, a little louder. Darius stepped inside, setting the tray down. He sat in the chair across from her. "'Cause I saw you," he said simply. "Back on Zarn Prime, when the palace was collapsing and everything was chaos, I saw you sneak past the guards. You weren't running. You were heading somewhere. And then our coms came back online. The Dominion's defenses shut down. You did something. God don't know how, but you helped win that battle." Ilya looked stunned, her lips parted slightly. "Kata saw that." "I did," Darius nodded. "No one else noticed. You were small, quiet, easy to overlook, but not by me." She looked down, silent again, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap. "I didn't know what else to do," she whispered. "I was so scared, and you still acted," Darius said. "That takes courage." Leah looked up slowly, and for the first time since her rescue, her expression changed. Not just fear or confusion, but something else. Something like hope. Darius stood. "You don't have to prove anything. Just rest. You're safe here." He turned to leave, but before the door closed, Ilya whispered one last thing. "Thank you for seeing me." The door shut behind him, and for the first time in days, she smiled. It was small and tired, but real. And in that moment, somewhere deep inside, the girl who had once been called the frail flower of the stars, a spark began to grow, something stronger than fear, something born from being seen, not as a symbol, but as a person. The war had taken everything from her, but maybe, just maybe, it had also given her something new. The Resolute drifted quietly through the stars, far from war zones and broken worlds, its engines humming like a calm heartbeat in space. But peace had not yet reached everyone inside. Princess Elia, though no longer a prisoner of the Zarn, moved like a shadow through the hall, silent, small, and almost invisible. She rarely left her cabin, and when she did, it was only at night, when the corridors were quiet and the crew slept. She avoided the mess hall, never joined the others, and flinched at every sudden sound. The crew tried not to stare, but they whispered among themselves. Who was she really? Why did Captain Cold choose her when he could have had power, wealth, anything? San thought she was a broken soul, too damaged to speak. Others believed there was something strange about her, something hidden behind those large silver eyes. Even the medic, who checked on her regularly, found her hard to read. She would nod politely, follow instructions, but say nothing more. Captain Darius Cole, though always busy with missions, never forgot about her. Every day, he left meals at her door and checked the security logs to make sure she was safe. He didn't push, didn't question her silence, but he watched and waited. He had seen people broken by war before, soldiers, civilians, even children, but Ilya wasn't like them. There was something different, something just beneath the surface, like a light trying to shine through fog. One evening, as the ship passed near a nebula, its purple glow filling the observation deck with soft color, Darius stood alone, staring out at the stars. Behind him, he heard the softest footsteps. He turned and saw her barefoot, wrapped in a simple robe, hands folded nervously. couldn't sleep?" he asked gently. She didn't answer, only nodded and looked out the window. They stood in silence for a long time, watching space move slowly around them. Then, just as he was about to leave her in peace, she spoke, barely a whisper. "The stars look different when you're free." Darius said nothing at first, not wanting to break the moment. "They do," he replied. "Okay, they look like they belong to you again." She didn't turn her head, but her voice came again, soft and uncertain. "I didn't know if you really saw me that day." "On Zarn Prime, I saw everything," he said quietly. "You saved us." She shook her head. "I only delayed them. The signal I sent, it didn't destroy anything. It just confused their fleet. That's all I could do." "Okay, that was enough," Darius said. "We needed time. You gave it to us." Her hands tightened slightly. "They never knew I could do it. The Emperor thought I was just another decoration." A soft voice, a quiet face. Darius looked at her closely. "But you were listening, watching." She finally turned her eyes to him. "I learned their systems, their language, their codes. I waited for the right moment, but I didn't think I'd survive." "You did," Darius said. "And now, you're here." Her voice grew faint again. "I don't know how to be here. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now." "You don't have to do anything," Darius said. "You're safe." "That's enough for now." She didn't look convinced. She kept her gaze on the stars, and the silence between them stretched again. The next morning, she didn't return to her room. Instead, she wandered the ship slowly, walking through the halls like a ghost exploring an unfamiliar world. Crew watched from a distance. She said little, answered only with small nods or single words, but she was there. She was moving, and that alone felt like something was changing. Days passed. She began to join the crew during mealtime, though she never ate much. She started listening to the navigation officer talk about planets they passed. Once, she helped the ship's engineer fix a damaged console, her hands surprisingly quick and steady. Darius noticed. He didn't ask questions, didn't press her, but he watched as the others started to notice too. Slowly, the whispers changed. She wasn't just a fragile girl anymore. She was observant, smart, useful, and something else was becoming clear. She understood technology better than anyone expected. One night, the ship's comm system glitched, cutting off their signal to a nearby station. The comms tech was baffled. Elia stepped forward, touched a few keys, and fixed it in less than a minute. The tech stared at her. "How did you know what to do?" Leah simply shrugged. "I learned it from the Zarn. They used a similar system." Darius was in the room and heard every word. He didn't show his surprise, but he added it to the growing list of mysteries surrounding her. Later, in private, he asked gently, "Why did you never tell anyone you could do this?" Her answer came with a small, sad smile. "'Cause they only paid attention when I said nothing. That was how I survived." The words sat heavy between them. She had hidden in silence, not out of fear, but strategy. She had worn her frailty like armor. But now, among the crew of the Resolute, something inside her was waking. It wasn't easy. There were bad days. Some nights, she locked herself in her room again. Sometimes, she flinched at loud voices. Sometimes, she cried and wouldn't say why. But then, there were good days moments when she laughed softly, or told a story from her homeworld, or helped a crew member with a problem they couldn't solve. The crew began to accept her, not as a guest or a rescued princess, but as part of the team. Still, there were things she hadn't told anyone, not even Darius. Late one night, she returned to the observation deck alone, activated a private console, hidden behind the wall panel, and connected to a secret archive. Her fingers danced over the controls, eyes scanning fast-moving data maps, codes, hidden Zarn transmissions. She wasn't just remembering what she had learned. She was preparing. Behind her, a faint noise made her freeze. She turned, found Darius standing there, watching silently. He didn't look angry, just curious. "You're not just recovering, are you?" he said. "You're planning something." She didn't deny it. They left something behind, something dangerous. "Okay. And I think I'm the only one who knows where it is." Darius stepped closer. "Then tell me. Let me help." Her voice was steady now. "Not yet. I need to be sure. But I promise, when the time comes, I'll tell you everything." For a long time, they stood there, the hum of the ship and the glow of distant stars around them. "Okay." In that moment, Captain Cole saw it clearly. Elia was not weak. She was not helpless. She was something else entirely. A survivor, a thinker, quiet force moving through shadows. And whatever came next, he knew she would not face it alone. The days aboard the Resolute passed quietly. But tension was building just beneath the surface, like a storm waiting to break. Princess Elia was no longer a silent figure hiding in corners. She moved through the ship with quiet confidence, studying systems, helping crew members, and watching everything with sharp, observant eyes. The crew had stopped whispering about her and started respecting her, even if most still didn't fully understand her. But Darius Cole knew something important was coming. He saw it in her careful movements, in the way she lingered over old data files, and in the late hours she spent alone with restricted systems no one else could access. She was searching for something from her past, something buried deep. One evening, as the ship glided through a cold sector near the edge of Coalition space, Darius found Elia in the engine room, working silently at a terminal with strange glowing codes scrolling across the screen. He didn't speak right away. He watched as her fingers moved swiftly, entering commands that no one on board had taught her. "That's Zarn code," he said finally, stepping closer. Didn't flinch. "Cass, it's encrypted, but I can read most of it." "The system is old. What are you looking for?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Elia paused, then turned to face him, her silver eyes serious. "I told you I'd explain when I was sure. Now I am." She tapped a few keys, and the screen changed, showing a map of a hidden world, marked only as Site Eco 7. "This place," she said, pointing to it, was a secret Zarn research base. It was never logged in Coalition files. "I know about it because I heard the Emperor mention it during one of his broadcasts. They were building something there, a last weapon, something they never got to finish." Darius stared at the screen. "And you think it's still active?" "I don't know," she said, "but if it is, it's dangerous. It was meant to wipe out entire civilizations in minutes. Something worse than anything we've seen." The words settled between them like cold iron. Darius leaned closer, studying the coordinates. "Why didn't you tell anyone sooner?" Elia looked away. "Because I wasn't sure I could trust myself. I thought maybe I imagined it, but the data's real, and it matches what I remember." He didn't press her. Instead, he nodded. "Then we check it out together." They plotted a course, quietly, not alerting the full crew to the mission's danger. Darius told them it was a systems survey standard procedure. But Elia worked day and night, gathering every detail, decoding every line of alien script, drawing from memories she had hidden deep inside. She didn't sleep much. She barely ate. Every time she closed her eyes, she remembered the dark halls of the Zarn Emperor's palace, the cold metal, the echo of cruel voices, the whisper of secrets passed between powerful men who never once looked at her as a person, but she had listened. Every word. And now those memories were the key. When they finally reached Site Eco 7, the planet looked dead. A gray wasteland covered in ash and broken stone. There were no signs of life, no energy signals, no defenses. Telia was certain "It's buried," she said as the landing shuttle touched down. "Everything's underground." Caius led a small team with Elia by his side. They wore light armor and carried scanners instead of weapons. First, the surface gave them nothing, just wind and silence. But then Elia found something, a small metal disc buried in the dirt. She brushed it off and pressed her hand to it. With a low hum, the ground beneath them shifted, revealing a narrow stairwell made of polished black stone. The entrance was real. Elia had been right. As they descended, the air grew colder. Lights flickered on automatically, sensing their presence. It's a hallway stretched deep underground, smooth and curved, with markings in the Zarn language etched into the walls. Darius stayed close to Elia, watching her eyes scan every symbol, every door. "I remember this place," she whispered. "I was brought here once, when I was very young. I didn't think I understood, but I did." I found the control room at the heart of the facility. Dust covered the panels, but the power was still running barely. Elia sat at the main terminal and began typing. The room filled with a soft blue glow as systems came online. A screen flashed, showing a long deactivated program called Vortex 9. Darius frowned. "What is that?" "It was their final project," Elia said. A machine that could send destructive energy across space in seconds. No warning, no defense. It could destroy a city from light years away. Her voice was shaking, but her hands were steady. "They never finished it, but the framework is still here. And the system is waking up." Just as she said that, alarms, blared lights turned red. A cold, mechanical voice echoed through the chamber in Zarn speech. Elia translated out loud. "Security breach detected. Reactivating defense system." Darius grabbed his fall back to the shuttle. Now. But the doors slammed shut before they could move. Metal walls sealed them in. From the floor, mechanical drones rose up, slim, spider-like machines with glowing red eyes. The room became a trap. Leah jumped back, pulling Darius behind a console. "I can shut them down," she shouted, typing furiously. Sparks flew as one of the drones fired a blast, hitting a nearby wall. The rest of the team took cover, returning fire. Elia's fingers danced over the keys, her mind moving faster than fear. She whispered the Zarn code under her breath, forcing the system to obey. Then, with a final strike of her hand, everything froze. The lights flickered once, then turned blue. The drones powered down, their limbs going still. The alarm fell silent. Darius stood slowly, breathing hard. "You stopped it?" Elia didn't look up from the terminal. "No, I paused it. The system is still active, and someone else may be watching." She turned to him, her face pale but strong. "This place can't be left here. It has to be destroyed." "We'll bring in a demolition team," Darius said. "We'll bury it for good." But Elia shook her head. "We don't have time. If the system finishes its self-repair cycle, it could activate fully. There's a core I can reach. If I overload it, the whole facility will collapse." Darius stepped forward. "It's too dangerous. Let me do it." "You can't," she said quietly. "It's coded to my biosignature. I'm the only one who can open the core chamber." He stared at her, torn between duty and the need to protect her. But she had already made her choice. She turned and ran toward the inner door, calling back, "Trust me, this is why I survived." Inside, she worked quickly, bypassing systems, using every memory she had. The chamber was glowing, the core pulsing with strange energy. She reached the console and entered the override code she had memorized as a child, hidden deep in her mind. The countdown began. 10 minutes until detonation. She ran back to Darius and the others, breathless but alive. "We have to go. Now." They raced back to the surface, climbing the long stairs as the ground trembled beneath them. The shuttle lifted off just as the mountain below cracked and exploded in a flash of fire and dust. From orbit, Site-Eco 7 was gone. A dead place, erased by the very girl once caged within it. Back aboard the Resolute, Elia sat alone in the medbay, covered in dust, silent again, but not broken. Darius stood outside, watching her through the glass, finally understanding the truth. She hadn't just survived Zarn. She had outsmarted them, endured them, and now destroyed the last of their evil plans. She was not the frail princess they once believed. She was something stronger, something no enemy had counted on, and whatever secrets her past still held. One thing was clear now. Elia was no one's prisoner. She was a force they would never see coming. The destruction of Site-Eco 7 left deep marks on everyone aboard the Resolute. But none more than Elia, who now walked through the ship, not as a mystery, but as someone the crew looked at with quiet awe. She had risked everything to stop a hidden evil and come back alive. Yet, even with their respect, Elia remained distant, as if her heart was still caught between the past and something yet to come. She spent long hours in the data core, studying old Zarn files she had recovered before the base exploded. Her face lit by the cold glow of alien code. Captain Darius Cole visited her often, watching in silence as her fingers moved across the screen with calm precision. He didn't interrupt, not unless she invited him to. But one day, she turned and said, "They had a plan for peace, too." Darius raised an eyebrow. "To Zarn?" She nodded. "A twisted one. Peace through fear. Control every world. Erase rebellion, and no one would dare to fight." Her voice was calm, but her eyes were hard. They believed order was more important than freedom. That strength made them right. Darius folded his arms. "And what do you believe?" She looked down at her hands. "That strength without kindness is just cruelty. I want to help build something better, but I don't know how." He studied her. "You already are." But Elia wasn't convinced. Something in her mind was still turning, still searching for answers, and when she returned to the war archives, she found something strange. A battle simulation program buried deep in the Coalition's mainframe. It wasn't public, and it wasn't supposed to be active, but it ran endless mock war zone tactics, human defenses, alien strategies from across the galaxy. She connected it with the old Zarn files and began testing patterns. Results shocked her. Every scenario she rewrote ended faster, with fewer deaths. She didn't use brute force. She used intelligence, speed, prediction. Elia didn't fight like a soldier. She fought like a ghost who saw 10 moves ahead. Soon, word of her work reached the Coalition command, and a quiet message came to Darius. "We want her to visit Central Command. See what else she knows." Darius hesitated, unsure if Elia was ready. But when he told her, she nodded. "I want to go. If I can help end more fighting, I should try." They arrived days later at the massive orbital base known as Sentinel Station, where admirals and diplomats watched the galaxy spin and decided the fate of worlds. Kalia wore simple clothes, not royal robes, and walked with quiet steps beside Darius. Inside the strategy chamber, generals scoffed at first. What could one quiet girl teach them about war? But then Elia stood before the wall of stars and lines, examined their models, and began asking questions they couldn't answer. Why send fleets through Nebula Path 7 when asteroid shifts make the route unstable? Why repeat formations the Zarn have already cracked 3 times? Why assume they won't adapt the same way we do? Her voice remained calm, but her logic was sharp. By the time she finished, the room was silent. One old general finally said, "Show, U.S., your plan." She did. and it was unlike anything they had seen. No brute invasions, no mass sacrifices. Instead, quick strikes, feints, false signals, and deep knowledge of enemy psychology. The plan didn't just beat the Czarnet made them retreat. She had learned their pride, their patterns, and turned it against them. The room gave no applause, only stunned silence. But the next day, she was offered a role as a civilian advisor, unarmed, but listened to by the highest command. Yet even with this new power, Elia stayed quiet, staying aboard the Resolute with Darius and the crew. "This ship is my home now," she said, "and I'm not finished yet." But something darker was rising. An old Zarn warlord, believed dead, had returned to Tavo, the Iron Strategist, one of the Emperor's last loyal commanders. His fleet had struck 3 outposts in a week and disappeared each time. Coalition intelligence couldn't track him. Elia recognized the pattern. "He's using blind space routes," she told Darius. "It's paths that appear empty on scans, but were used for secret movement during the Old War." He pulled up a map of star currents and showed him a hidden zone. "He'll strike here next. I'm sure of it." Darius brought the prediction to command. They were skeptical, but he trusted her. The Resolute moved ahead of all others, hiding near the edge of the system Elia had marked. For 2 days, they saw nothing. Then, just as the crew began to doubt, a ripple appeared in the blacker fleet of black Zarn ships, silent and massive, slipped into the system like shadows. The Resolute sent the signal. Coalition forces jumped in within minutes, prepared, positioned exactly as Elia had advised. The trap snapped shut. Tavo's fleet found itself surrounded, unable to run. But the warlord did not surrender. His flagship powered up a forbidden Wapena shockwave emitter that could destroy a city. From orbit, coalition ships tried to stop him, but he was too fast. Then Elia spoke. "I know his voice code. I can hijack the signal, but I need to be close." Darius hesitated only a second. "Suit up. You're going in." They flew a small shuttle, through debris and fire, straight toward the heart of the battle. Darius piloted while Elia worked the transmitter. They dodged blasts, passed burning holes, and reached Tavo's ship just as the emitter began to charge. Elia opened the line and spoke in Zarn. "This is Princess Elia of House Vel. I was once your prisoner. Now I command your silence." The warlord's voice boomed back, cold and cruel. "You are nothing, a broken pet of the humans." Elia didn't flinch. "Then why does your weapon listen to me?" She entered the old override code. It failed. She tried again, one more line, a forgotten phrase used only in training. This time, it worked. The emitter shut down. Saval roared in fury, but it was too late. Coalition ships disabled his engines, and the fleet was captured. Back on the Resolute, the crew cheered as the last Zarn ships surrendered. Elia sat quietly, her hands trembling from the effort. Darius stood beside her. "You saved millions." She looked up, tired but strong. "I didn't want to fight again, but sometimes peace must be protected." He nodded. "You fought with your mind. That matters more." She gave a faint smile. "I only wish my people could see this. Peace is possible." "They will," Darius said, "'cause of you." And in that moment, Elia, once a silent figure in the shadows, finally understood her path not as a weapon, not as a prize of war, but as someone who could outthink darkness and light the way forward. One hard choice at a time. The Resolute floated in orbit above Haven Prime, a peaceful planet known for diplomacy and trade, where coalition leaders gathered for a summit meant to secure new peace treaties. But below that calm surface, whispers stirred in shadows. And the target of those whispers was Princess Elia, whose sharp mind and rising influence had begun to unsettle people in power. She had stopped a hidden weapon, predicted enemy attacks, and saved lives without ever raising a weapon. And that kind of quiet strength was dangerous to those who dealt in fear and control. For not everyone wanted peace, and some feared what she might uncover next. Ilya spent her time preparing for her speech before the Coalition Council. A rare honor for someone not born on a human world, and though she said little about it, Darius noticed the worry in her eyes, the way she glanced over her shoulder more often, or how she walked the halls of the Resolute alone late into the night. Something had changed, something that began when an anonymous message reached her, a single line of code buried in a report she wasn't meant to see. But she knew the encryption. It was Zarn designed, the same used by their deep agents, and it simply read, "She speaks too much." That same day, a diplomat shuttle exploded during docking labeled an accident, but Ilya found evidence of tampering buried in the system logs. She didn't tell Darius right away, afraid he might be pulled from command or worse, but she left subtle traces in the ship's records in case something happened to her. As the summit approached, Ilya began receiving more veiled threats hidden in old Zarn Kod's phrases only she could understand. Like the garden withers under too much light, or silence is safer than truth. And each time she decrypted one, her resolve hardened, but the weight on her shoulders grew heavier. On the night before her speech, a stranger appeared in Haven Prime's corridor. Outside her temporary quarters, a tall man with perfect Coalition uniform, but no official ID, and a strange accent that tried to sound human, but didn't quite fit. He smiled to Isley and said he was part of security oversight, but Ilya didn't buy it. When he left, she checked the logs, no record of his arrival. No clearance on the station, and the cameras had been looped during his visit. She knew now she was being hunted. She told Darius everything, showing him the logs, the message, and the patterns. His face darkened, and he ordered silent security detail on her. Men he trusted from the Resolute, but he also knew they were running out of time. "They're not just trying to scare you," he said. "They want to erase you before you can speak." Ilya nodded. "Then I have to speak louder." On the day of the summit, the Grand Hall of Haven Prime buzzed with voices from a dozen worlds, all gathered to hear the girl who had once been the Zarn Emperor's prisoner, and had now become one of the most important voices in the peace process. She wore no crown, no royal symbols, only a simple gray coat and a pendant from her homeworld that shimmered faintly when light touched it. She walked to the center podium as lights dimmed, her every step quiet but firm, and the room silenced. As she began to speak not with fire, but with calm clarity. "I was once silent because I was told I had no voice," she said. "Now I speak not for revenge, but to stop others from being silenced." She spoke of war, of cruelty masked as control, of peace being more than the absence of fighting it. Was justice, choice, and the safety to speak truth without fear. Her words stirred the crowd, some nodding, some frowning, but none unmoved. And then the lights flickered, just once. Then again, the floor shook slightly, so faint most didn't notice. But Elliot did. So did Darius, watching from the security booth. "Power anomaly," his comm officer said, "localized, directly under the council chamber." "Lock it down," Darius ordered. But before they could act, a soft hum began beneath the floor, followed by a pulsing sound. Then, from one of the far corridors, gas began pouring in a faint mist, odorless but visible to those who looked. Panic spread quickly as alarms sounded and guards rushed to evacuate the crowd. But Ilya didn't run. She stayed at the podium, gripping its edges, eyes narrowed. She recognized the pattern. This wasn't an attack to kill everyone. It was a cover. A plan to create chaos, erase evidence, and strike at one person in the confusion. Two men moved fast through the fog, dressed like medics, but with no scanners, and their path was straight toward her. But before they reached her, Darius appeared through a side door, stun weapon raised, dropping one of them with a clean shot, and a Marine from the Resolute tackled the second. The gas cleared moments later, vents activated by emergency response. Teams in the chamber emptied with sirens still ringing. When security swept the hall, they found the trigger for a microcharge device hidden under the floor, not powerful enough to destroy the hall, but enough to kill the person standing at the podium, Elia. Darius sat beside her in the med bay later, his expression unreadable. They nearly got you. Elia nodded slowly. And they'll try again. She handed him a small chip, the one she had found earlier. This has part of the message I decrypted. Tina, I think it links back to someone high in the command chain. Someone who doesn't want peace. Darius looked at it, then her. You're saying this wasn't just rogue Zarn loyalists? No, she said. This came from inside. That night, Coalition intelligence began quiet investigations. Elia stayed on the Resolute, guarded and watched, but not out of fear because she had work to do. Someone was plotting from the shadows, and now she knew the price of silence. But she wouldn't be silent, not again. And the next time they came for her, she would be ready. Because the war for peace was far from over, and the most dangerous battles were just beginning. Elia stood alone at the edge of the viewing deck aboard the Resolute, the stars reflecting in her eyes like 1,000 choices waiting to be made. And though the chaos of the summit attack had passed and the saboteurs had been caught and interrogated, Keys still felt fragile, like glass held together by hope in careful hands. The messages hidden in code had stopped, but the silence that followed was not comforting. It was the kind that came before a storm, and deep down, she knew it. Word had spread fast. The young alien princess who had helped turn the tide of war, who had survived betrayal, assassination attempts, and a broken past, was now being called to something even greater. A message had arrived from what remained of the Zarn high houses, leaders without a throne, scattered nobles clinging to old customs and uncertain futures, and they had chosen her not just as a symbol, but as the new monarch of a reborn Zarn society. She hadn't asked for it, hadn't sought it, and yet the crown was being offered freely, with voices pleading across the stars for her to lead. Darius watched her closely, uncertain what choice she would make. We were close now, closer than anyone had ever been to her, and though they had never spoken the word aloud, their bond was clear in every glance, every shared silence. You don't have to go, he said one evening as they walked the lower decks. You've already changed the galaxy without a crown. Elia looked at him with soft eyes. But if I refuse, what happens to my people? Who will speak for them? Darius stopped walking. Maybe someone who hasn't already given so much. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The next day, she took a shuttle to meet the representatives of the high houses on the neutral moon of Sorella. There, in a hall of ancient stone and flickering light, the elders stood around her, tall and proud, dressed in flowing robes marked with symbols of the old empire. They knelt before her, offering the crown of stars, the symbol of Zarn rule. A delicate circlet made of woven crystal and metal threads that shimmered with the energy of their ancestors. They spoke of duty, of tradition, of legacy, and of a future only she could shape. Elia listened in silence, her heart heavy, her mind racing with questions. At the end, the oldest among them asked, "Will you lead us, Princess Elia of House Vel, and guide our people into a new age of light and strength?" She stared at the crown for a long time. It was beautiful, but it was heavy in a way no metal could measure. She saw not just the past, but the future. It would demand less speeches, politics, walls around her life, and a part of her buried beneath duty. Slowly, she stepped back. No, she said clearly, her voice calm. The room gasped. You refuse the crown? The elder asked, stunned. Elia nodded. Tsar needs something more than a queen. They need to learn to stand together, not behind someone. She looked around. I will not lead you from a throne, but I will help you. Build one together, one that does not demand obedience, but earns trust. Her words rang out like a quiet bell, shocking and bold. Some elders looked outraged, others thoughtful, but none spoke as she turned and left the hall, leaving the crown untouched. Back aboard the Resolute, she was greeted by silence, then sudden cheers from the crew. News had spread already. Tyrus met her with a half smile. Didn't feel like wearing a crown today. She raised an eyebrow. It clashes with my code. He laughed, but then grew serious. So what now? Elia walked to the main window, where the stars stretched forever. Hell, well, I'm needed, not as a ruler, just as me. Over the next weeks, she became a quiet force across coalition space, not in command, but in influence. She traveled to border worlds once forgotten, helped settle disputes with calm words instead of weapons, and taught leaders how to listen before they fought. The name Elia began to mean something more peaceful. Strength, quiet wisdom, earned trust. Her people began rebuilding without a queen, guided by her vision, but led by many hands. Meanwhile, a final report reached her desk details of who had truly tried to silence her. It wasn't one person, but a network tied to weapons dealers and war profiteers who had thrived in chaos. She shared the files with coalition authorities, and one by one, the shadow players were brought into light. Still, Elia remained cautious. Peace was not a finish line. It was a path walked daily, and the road ahead was long. One evening, back on the Resolute, she and Darius stood on the observation deck again. You could have had everything, he said quietly. A throne, a legacy. She turned to him. I already have a legacy. I chose it. And that's more than most ever get. He nodded, his hand brushing against hers. What if people try to crown you again? She smiled. Then I'll remind them I already chose my future. And I'll keep choosing it every day. The stars shone brighter that night, or maybe it just felt that way, as two figures stood together, not as conquerors or rulers, but as people who had faced war, danger, silence, and truth, and who had chosen hope, not for power, but for the chance to live free and help others do the same. And so the girl who was once a prize of war, the silent one with hidden strength, became something no crown could ever define, a light for a future, yet unwritten, and a reminder that the greatest power is not taken, but given, when one chooses peace and walks with purpose, step by step, into the stars.